Anyone who has experienced the grief of losing a loved one knows what kind of night that must have been. That first night without that person that we have loved and been loved by. Sleep had come sporadically, if at all. Was it all a dream, or was it reality? Jesus was dead. And every time she awoke, feelings of despair and sadness quickly filled Mary's thoughts and her heart. She found herself looking toward the small sliver of a window in the stone wall of their house to see any sign of the coming dawn. And finally, the darkness had surrendered to a pale yellow light on the horizon. Up quickly, having prepared everything the night before, the two Marys headed out towards the tomb to check on Jesus' body. As they walked, they said little. Their cadence was somber in this gray time between night and day. And if the birds were singing, they didn't notice. But as they neared the tomb of Jesus, suddenly the earth began to tremble. And then a blinding flash of light, and an angel descended and began rolling back the large round stone that had been set in place to protect Jesus' body. The angel was dressed in white, and his appearance was nearly blinding. And after rolling away the stone, the angel sat down on top of it, his legs dangling off the side, like a conquering hero, as if to say, "I've got this. This is no problem." You might even say a little bit of angel trash talk. And the guards who had been assigned the night shift to watch over Jesus' body and to make sure no one tampered with it or worse yet stole it away, they are so frightened that they fall down like dead men. The angel's message to the women is, do not be afraid. Jesus is not here. He has been raised. And they are invited to go and see for themselves and to look in the door and take a look at the empty tomb. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified, the angel continues. Jesus who was crucified. This reminds us and them that Jesus was God's Son and that Jesus is a crucified Savior. We are not to forget the cross and the way that He died. The way that God chose to save the world is confirmed in the angel message. Do not forget how it happened. And as followers of Jesus, disciples are called to remember that suffering and sacrificial love is the way of God's kingdom in the world. And we are called to live the way of the cross. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Further, the women are told to go and tell Jesus' disciples that He is going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see Him. These women are the first to proclaim the good news of Jesus' resurrection. They are the first evangels or evangelists. So they run with fear and joy to tell the others. Feet that only moments ago were heavy and plodding with sorrow now bounced across the wet dew on the grass. Their sense of dread and despair was evaporating as quickly as the morning mist. As they hurried along, suddenly Jesus appears to them. "Greetings," He says. It is a familiar kind of greeting, like we might say, "Hey," or "Good morning." And if Jesus were raised here in the South and maybe in Johnston County, maybe He would say, "Hey, y'all, how are you? It's good to see you." It is also a greeting that can be translated rejoice. And naturally, at seeing Jesus, they fling themselves at Jesus' feet and wrap their trembling arms around His ankles. They hold Him and they worship Him and they cry and laugh all at the same time. It is important for us to know that it's not just about an empty tomb, because an empty tomb in itself doesn't prove anything. It's about having an experience of Jesus and a relationship with Him. This Jesus has a voice, and He has a body, and He has feet. He is recognizable. Jesus is real and touchable. Jesus is real, but He's different. This is a different kind of body. It's a resurrected body, a glorified body, like the one that you and I will have someday when Jesus comes or when we go to be with Him in that new heaven and that new earth that He will bring about. And Jesus' message to the women is, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers and tell them to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. Do not be afraid. We notice that this admonition is mentioned 2 times in this passage. And what are our fears this Easter morning? This is an Easter unlike any that any of us have ever experienced before. There's a deadly virus out there on the prowl. There's the concerns that we have over loved ones, especially those who have parents and friends who are older, who are vulnerable. There's job loss, and there are bills coming due that will need paying. There are folks who've planned weddings that are having to postpone them. And what about our students, those who are seniors and who are missing out on so much of their senior year and maybe are concerned about going to college and getting those applications in? There are all kinds of things that are on our hearts and minds. We all have fears, and yet Jesus' message to the Marys and to us is, do not be afraid. That fear has been conquered. Fear has been conquered along with death in the resurrection of Jesus. Max Lucado has reminded his readers that the most repeated phrase from the lips of Jesus was, fear not. And in fact, in every book of the Bible, in some form or fashion, we are admonished and commanded to not be afraid, to trust. Jesus, the incarnate one who came into this world to know what it was like to live our lives and to experience life from our viewpoint, knows every fear and every concern and every worry that we might have. And He came to be one of us so that He might die for those things and set us free. And so Jesus knows, and He promises us that He will be with us through our fears. Julie and I were doing a devotion, sharing a devotion not too long ago, and that devotion reminded us, in the words of the writer, that every fear that we have, or nearly every fear, is usually something in the future. It is something that we are dreading or something that we are thinking about that might happen. Isn't it something to think about that most of our fears are fantasies? They're things that haven't happened, and oftentimes many of those things that we fear never do come to fruition. We focus our lives and our thoughts and our hearts so often on things that are not real and that probably won't take place. What a waste of energy. What a waste of trust. And Jesus invites us to trust Him and to give to Him those fears. Jesus sends the 2 Marys also to His brothers. Now this is significant for us to remember. We think about the disciples, and we think about what happened with Peter and with Judas. Remember, Peter denied Jesus in the courtyard and the rooster crowed, and we remember the tragedy of Judas betraying Jesus for the 30 coins and then what happened to him in the aftermath of that. But we need to remember also that all of the disciples, in one way or another, deserted Jesus and left Him alone in His hour of need. But Jesus says, go and tell my brothers. Jesus is saying, go and tell them they are forgiven. He's saying, all is forgiven. I still love you. And we have a future together. We're getting ready to have a new beginning in ministry together and a fresh start. Wendy Wright, in her work, The Rising, writes of the Easter power of forgiveness. This is the miracle of Easter, she says, that whatever is bound, whatever is enchained or enslaved or unfree can be loosened, liberated, and freed through our forgiveness. In fact, if we do not exercise this God-given capacity, our lack of action is not neutral. Without forgiveness, we hold each other bound. Without being forgiven, we cannot be free. By sending Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to the disciples, Jesus makes them agents of reconciliation. Go and tell my brothers. Go and tell my brothers that we're good. All is well. And we have a fresh start and a new future. Easter, brothers and sisters, may be a good time to bring about new life and reconciliation and forgiveness in our relationships. Maybe we can think of someone in our family or a friend or someone that we know that needs resurrection, that needs forgiveness, and maybe we need to be set free too. Maybe relationships can be resurrected and families can be restored, and maybe communities can be united. I think of an anonymous author who once wrote, "We are most like beasts when we kill. We are most like man when we judge, we are most like God when we forgive. And God offers us mercy, brothers and sisters, and then gives us an opportunity to offer that to one another. And then the resurrected Christ promises that His disciples will see Him again in Galilee. Now maybe Galilee is wherever we are or wherever we go back to this afternoon. Galilee perhaps is where we live, the situations and circumstances and challenges that we return to at home and at work and at school. Maybe Galilee has changed a lot for us in some ways. Maybe Galilee is where we're quarantined or set apart or social distancing. Maybe Galilee is the kitchen table where we're gathering with our children and doing the best we can to teach them lessons and do some schooling. Maybe Galilee is the office where we're working by ourselves, or maybe Galilee is the crowded emergency room or the hospital ICU unit where our brave nurses and doctors go to treat those who are ill. Maybe Galilee is fighting through an illness of our own or finding ways to be there for one another. Galilee is where life takes us, and Jesus promises that wherever our Galilees are, He will meet us there. However, there's one other thing about Galilee that's important and significant. Remember that Galilee was the place where Jesus began His ministry. It was His home base and where most of His ministry took place. So Matthew wants his early church to remember that Galilee is where Jesus was in ministry and that ministry continues. We as disciples are invited to join with the resurrected and alive Jesus to carry on His ministry in the world. Galilee is our place of calling and service, wherever that may be for each of us. It is where we go to wash feet, to hold hands, to care for those who are sick. It is where we go to feed the hungry. It is over in Galilee that Jesus is going and where we will meet Him. He will be in Galilee, where there's a child to be taught, a hand to be held, a lesson to be learned, and a song to be sung. There we are promised that we will see Him, experience His love and His presence and His power. Hey y'all, rejoice. We'll see Him over in Galilee.